Coming up on the Men at the Movies podcast, we discuss the 1988 movie Willow. The main characters think that they are less than, they are not enough. Their behavior is motivated trying to prove their value to the crowd watching. It's only when Willow resists the temptation to validate himself and accept the truth of his identity that he accomplishes his purpose and his mission. Ignore the bird, follow the river, and let's discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being.
Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me is a fellow North Carolinian, new guy to the podcast, Bryan Mitchell. Hey, Bryan, how you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me.
We are fresh off the Panthers draft, the first round, hope for the future of the franchise. It's also funny. Not a lot of the guests on here are sports fans, so it was exciting to talk about a little bit Panthers football with you when we first got on.
Oh yeah, I'm a big Panthers fan. I love this state. First in flight, all the way.
So you don't buy into any of those rumors that the Wright brothers weren't actually the first ones to fly?
No, they definitely came down from Ohio and flew right on our coast. So, thank you, Wright brothers.
So I met Bryan through Troy and Stacy Hooker, who we did the Bourne Identity with. I'm trying to get them to do more because that was such a fun conversation. So Willow is a movie, came out in 88. This seems right up. You also know Sarah from Realm Makers. So this seems like a movie that's right up her alley. She's probably going to be super upset that we did it without her. Tough nuggies, as they say.
Sorry, Sarah.
So Bryan, when I brought this up, when we got introduced, we're going back and forth on email. Why is it that you're like, why was this one of your three? I think it was this one, Legend and Labyrinth. Were those the three?
Yeah, they're all in the 80s, right? And what stood out to me with Willow is that it just has this amazing journey through a fantastical land and all these really great characters, and you see them grow and you feel like you know them. Like I felt like I knew Willow right from the start when he sees the baby in the basket in the river. Like he didn't want any part with that baby, but it's like he knew that there was some trouble coming along with this baby. So I felt like Willow wasn't a fool, but he also has a bigger heart than what he was showing, and he was braver than what he was showing. But it was mostly the characters that made me decide that Willow would be a great conversation.
Right. You sort of see them, and I don't know if it's just because, this was back when I was 13. I don't know. How old were you when this one came out?
I missed the movie. I couldn't go see it. I didn't see it until it was on VHS or something. And then I forgot about it. Then I saw it again so many years later. And now I can watch it whenever because it's on Disney Plus, and plus we got the DVD. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because nobody has VHS tapes. If you do have a tape, you probably don't have a VHS player. That was us. A couple years ago, we have these baskets of tapes. And I tell my wife, I was like, we should get rid of these because we don't have anything to play it on. And she really hated it, but I took him to Goodwill one day when she wasn't looking.
Goodwill's like, what is this?
All right. No, they're like for $1. I'm sure there's somebody out there that has a player. So it's interesting because I remember I was just reading something about music and how in our adolescence, the music we listen to sort of emblazons on our brain and creates these feelings of nostalgia so that, if you're listening to music that you listened to when you were a 12, 15-year-old, you're going to be transported and you're going to feel like you did listening to that song back then. That's probably why like Guns N' Roses and Leonard Skinner have meaning for me, because that was what I listened to when I consider my adolescence. What about you? What music were you listening to back in your younger years, your wonder years, as it goes?
Thrash metal. I'm a big Metallica fan, Megadeth, Iron Maiden. But in the 80s, I was all pop rock. I was into Billy Joel and Michael Jackson when I was a kid. But when I actually figured out who I was, a little bit more heavy metal met the mix. And after the doom and gloom day of my teenage years, it stuck with me. I just love the power and the feel of power chords and harmonizing guitars. I just love it. That's my stuff. That's
right.
my jam.
Music's not just meant to be heard. It's meant to be felt.
Oh, yeah.
And it's funny. I did a podcast earlier with Grayson, who mixes our podcast. And he's talking about, we sort of nerded out on the sound design aspect and talking about how movies, there's this rumble, and it's like, you're supposed to feel it more than you can hear it. So that's sort of, I'm getting those same things of when you're looking at the movies or the music, when you're looking at the music, you've got Metallica and the thrash metal. And then but the movies you like are much different than those. They're not the crank up the volume on them. So is this one of those movies that creates that feeling of nostalgia from your youth?
It does, and the music on it does too. Like I can hear it in my head now, the theme to Willow. There's a lot of great soundtracks in the 80s as well. Of course, John Williams was one of the greats. He didn't do the Willow's music, I don't believe, but
no, it was James Horner, but he's also a great one.
Very great as well. So that's when I think of Willow, a lot of times that song comes right to mind. And I'm going to save everybody by not humming it and whistling it right now.
If it had words, then you'd be in trouble because you probably would sing it. But there's no words.
No words.
I'm surprised on the Never Ending Story, Sarah didn't actually sing it, although she might have. I can't remember. So when I was watching it, and I hadn't seen it in many years, but like you said, I felt like I wasn't even sure if I'd seen it all the way through. Just watching it in bits and pieces, catching it on TV, like you mentioned. But I thought it's a very obvious framework for the hero's journey. Like, some movies sort of stray from it, or they go off on tangents. And this one really stuck to it pretty clearly. You've got a call to adventure. The baby shows up. He resists the invitation. Then something happens that sort of makes him go and enter into the unknown. And when they leave, that's called crossing the threshold. And that's a scene that you really like that we'll talk about. And then along the way, he has trials where he learns sorcery and learns who he is. And friends are revealed. Enemies are revealed. And there's a certain... he has to go through the death and the resurrection, but all of that is so that he can return home transformed. And we see that at the very end of the movie. And I mean, a lot of the great stories are framed from that. And I mean, I think in a lot of ways, the gospel is sort of based on the hero's journey as well.
Yeah, we are the heroes. I remember, watching a lot on Joseph Campbell and how he came up with that. And when I was learning about it, I was like, oh, he's an anthropologist. I didn't know that would come from an anthropologist, right. But it's so true. It's Star Wars uses it. So many use it. Labyrinth uses it. All these stories I suggested uses that framework. And some people use it without even knowing it, because every story in school, I remember there's like some stuff happens. There's rising action, a climax, and then a resolution. But that's kind of a very bare bones kind of plot line. But the the richness comes out if you use a framework that people are familiar with, such as the hero's journey. But the cool thing is, because we hear stories and we kind of know how they're done, you don't necessarily need to be extremely schooled on the hero's journey in order to write a good story or appreciate a good story. But I do think it's so cool. So if anyone's listening and they are interested in learning more about it, definitely look up Joseph Campbell and watch some YouTube videos, buy the book. It's amazing right there.
So you talked about how, like, why you picked this movie, but what is it that you love? What is it that makes you sort of enjoy? What makes you pick it out on a family movie night and say, "Hey, let's watch Willow"?
Yeah.
What are you like? What, when you go into a movie, you have expectations. You look forward to something, especially if it's a movie you've seen a few times. So what is it about this one that you look forward to?
I love the characters. When I was a kid, I loved the brownies. I thought the brownies were the funniest little things ever. The way they got into everything, and the scene with the cat, for instance, and the love potion. He falls in love with the cat briefly. And but growing up and growing more mature, and even then, I knew Willow was a really cool character that I liked right away. He was kind of like, no, I don't want to put up with this child. There's too much trouble with it. And he already felt like there was going to be trouble with it. And his family took to that baby really quickly. And when that baby took to him and was quiet when he was holding her, he kind of fell in love with that baby, Elora Dannon, right away. Mm-hmm. And of course, the next really big character we come into contact with is Mad Mardigan. And he has this Han Solo quality about him. And some people thought he was too close to Han Solo, but I felt like he had a bit more of a charm and was a little bit more looking for love than Han Solo ever was. He's supposed to be this great swordsman, and he proves that he is, but at the same time, he does tricks and he kind of bumbles them. So there's a human quality about it that I like. I guess it's his charm and just the way he is. When I was younger, I thought he was great because he's a great swordsman. As far as Sorsha goes, the thing with her is that her mother is the most evil thing in this world, Bavmorda, Queen Bavmorda. And she completely does a 180 and leaves that evil army that she's leading and changes. Besides them, I'm thinking of some others. Razel, that sorceress who Willow is seeking out at one point to help out in the journey. She's this animal when they first meet, and Willow's trying to change her back into who she was. And eventually he gets it right. But the change is just so funny for me as a child. But as I'm growing up, there's nostalgia there, but there's always, for me, a lot of change and a lot of growth in all these characters, the way that the story progresses. It's the characters that I love about this story.
Yeah, and I think we see that with a lot of these more sort of child-friendly, and especially with the animated movies. They can sneak in some powerful themes because they're a little more simple. You're not making them as I don't know, distorted and caricatured. Like a lot of the bad guys for the superhero movies are just, they don't make any sense. But when you look at each one of these main characters, I think it's sort of, they're Trojan horsing us. They're putting this out there and saying, yeah, it's a fun movie. It's something you can watch with your kids, but it's connecting to us because our guard is down. Right. And because each one of these, as you were describing those different characters, I'm like, each one of those is less than they think they're less than they are. All right. You've got Willow, who's just a peck. That's what the big people, the humans, all call him. He's sort of a frustrated, struggling farmer. He wants to be a sorcerer, but a sorcerer's apprentice, but doesn't really know how, doesn't trust himself. You've got Mardigan, who I think he has a desire to fight for something, but has probably been disappointed at times. And so he's taken to taking care of himself, doing things for himself. Even when he takes Elora Danan, he's doing it so they'll get him out of the crow's nest he's in. And Sorsha, to me, is a really interesting character because of how she transforms. And she's in an early scene, she's sent off to go find the baby, right? But then they sort of send the huntsman with her, the skull-faced guy. And she's like, why do I need him? And in a lot, like, I see her as someone who suffered a mother wound, right? Like so many people have, of trying to appease a mom who will never be appeased, never being enough, and trying, no matter what you do, falling short. And even Rizal, when Willow finally gets it right, he gets undistracted, he turns her back. When she was turned into a marmot or whatever she is in the beginning, she was a beautiful young woman. But it's been decades now, and she comes out and she's like, where's the time gone? She has become old. She's not what she thought she was in a lot of ways. And that's why I think this movie connects with so many of us in so many different ways, is we sort of feel like Willow or the sorcerer or Mad Mardigan or Sorsha or Ravel, where we feel like we're not what we think we are in both good and bad ways. That country song, I'm not as good as I once was, but I'm as good once as I ever was.
Oh, yeah, I know that one. Tobey Maguire.
We don't normally pull up country music on here, but when we do, it's a good one. And, as I've gotten older, I feel that. It's like I can't run like I used to. I can't play basketball. If I sprint, I'm pulling a hamstring guaranteed.
It's Toby Keith, not Tobey Maguire. It came to my head like, who's Tobey Maguire? He's an actor. Right. Duh.
It was Spider-Man.
Yeah, Spider-Man. I wonder how it would sound if he sang it. Hopefully better than how he danced in Spider-Man.
when Venom took over,
yeah.
Weirdly, or so one of the scenes that you sort of along that concept of not who we sort of think we are or we're pretending to be is the sorcerer, the sort of the leader of the village. And one of your favorite scenes, one that you liked, was early in the movie. They discover the baby, and there's two things sort of there that describe their reliance on magic. But even their reliance on magic was shown to be false. So here we are. It's going to start with the town council. Willow has brought the baby in, and so he says, as we're going into this, as we're making this big decision about what to do with this baby and save our village from the big people, here I'm going to consult the bones. And then there's a moment where he's like, okay, follow the bird. And the bird doesn't go where he wants it to. He's like, forget the bird. But this idea that he's in this position of power and leadership, sort of putting on an act so that the others will listen to him.
I will consult the bones. The bones tell me nothing. Do you have any love for this child?
Yes. Yes, I do.
The bones have spoken! Willow Offgood, the safety of this village depends upon you.
Raise the bones!
Raise the bones! But you will need help. Who has the courage to protect our brave fellow on his journey?
I'll go with him.
Migos. Excellent choice. I'll go. No, not Bunker. He's the best warrior in the village. We need him here. Bunker, step back.
this expedition needs is a leader. And according to the bones, that leader is you, Burglecut.
Bunker!
Go in the direction the bird is flying.
It's going back to the village!
Ignore the bird. Follow the river.
So what do those scenes sort of, what do they point to? What do they say to you, Bryan?
Well, something you just said was pretty profound. Putting on an act so others will listen. I think a lot of times we do that today in our lives. We put on this act thinking that people will listen to us more. Maybe we go to a university to get a musical degree, some degree in music, even though we already are great musicians with our hands. But we want people to listen to us. We want people to hire us. So we go on and obtain some more acolytes so that we can grow and have more people listen to us. Influencers on YouTube. A lot of times they're not doing everything who they are. I learned sometime recently this child character called Blippi. He did some horrible video a long time ago, and that came back to haunt him. It's just really bad, but that's the link that people will go to be heard. And it's an absurd kind of thing, and it's a horrible degradation to society that people will do that just to have people look at them. And that's like a prideful thing, and it's chasing fame. But another thing is with this that I was thinking about, from what came to my mind when I was thinking about what is it with these scenes, why do these things mean something to me? When it comes to magic and the use of magic in these scenes, they're relying on something that they shouldn't be relying on to get somewhere. They have other tools in their pocket to get where they're going. He already knows that they need to follow the river, but at the same time, he's using his influencer costume disguise to have everyone believe he's this magical person. He is magical. He throws an apple up in the air and becomes a bird. And that bird you cannot change. It's a free bird.
Hey, we're going back to Skinnerd.
Oh, yeah. The bird you cannot change. It's going to go back to the village rather than go in the direction it's supposed to. So never mind the bird, follow the river. Not just, guys, y'all follow the river, and that's going to take you where you need to go. But he wants to put on that act. And sometimes it's best to be real, to be yourself, and to use the right tools.
Right, because he says he told Willow, the bones tell me nothing. It's all something, and they're like, praise the bones. Again, going back to this idea, we think we're not enough. If he just says, in my years of wisdom, Willow, do you love this child? You should go. We need volunteers. And then he manipulates Burglecut into getting the Voknar, the great warrior. He's like, well, we need him, so we're going to take this guy so that we'll get the other guy. So he's manipulating them, but he's not doing it because he's obviously has some wisdom, but he doesn't trust that they'll listen to him without these other sort of ceremony, these machinations. I don't know. That's the word that's popping into my head, which I think Willow has the same struggle. I was just reading something today. It said, we basically become sort of the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with. Something like that. And if Willow is looking at this guy who's sort of more of I'm having trouble speaking today. He's more theatrical. He's more putting on a show to cover the fact that to sort of persuade people. Well, Willow doesn't have any of that. So he doesn't trust himself because he's not like that guy. Even though Willow actually is a pretty good, quote unquote magician, the sleight of hand stuff, hiding the pig and doing the other, I can't remember the other trick he did. But there's a scene sort of in between that clip, the two clips I just played, that speaks to Willow's struggle, as well as I would say the struggle that we have, not just with our creating, whether that's writing books, making videos. It also comes into play of sort of doing our jobs, being a husband, being a father, because there's many times that I face the situation where I'm like, I don't really feel like I know what I'm doing. I'm totally winging it, totally going out on a limb, dealing with the uncertainty. So Willow, as part of his test because he wants to be an apprentice for the sorcerer, has to pass a test. And the test is the wizard puts up his hand and say, what is the most powerful finger? And as we're going to hear in the clip, Willow didn't go with he didn't trust his gut. He did what he thought he should do, not what he knew he should do. And Willow's greatest struggle is also our own.
What's your problem, son?
How do you mean?
When I held up my fingers, what was your first impulse?
Well, it was stupid.
Just tell me.
Pick my own finger.
Aha. That was the correct answer. You lack faith in yourself. More than anyone in the village, you have the potential to be a great sorcerer. Now, when you're out there, listen to your own heart.
How do you relate to Willow in those situations where you feel where you're trying to accomplish something, but you feel uncertain and a severe lack of confidence, like I said, like Willow does?
Oh man,
going deep.
It's a lot of times when I'm not feeling totally certain about something. And of course, there's always Google, but you can't always rely on the internet for the best answers. Sometimes you really have to reach out to the sages in your life. Maybe my dad might know something about fixing the hot water heater in the basement. Maybe somebody else has a greener thumb than me, because neither my thumbs or my wife's thumbs are green. And I'm pretty sure the neighbors are knowing that as well. We have a community around us where we can always ask people for advice when we are not certain. And sometimes no one's certain, because life can be uncertain. Use the same word. But in traffic, you're not always sure what you're going to meet on the road. You know the rules. You know that others know the rules, but you know that some people aren't going to follow the rules. It's just a thing in life. Yeah.
So, Bryan, why do you think we have that? We're hesitant to ask for help, to ask for the guidance when we are uncertain. Like we see Willow. Willow doesn't want to look stupid, whether it's with farming or doing magic tricks, or even up there, he does what he thinks the crowd is expecting him to do more than what he feels like he should do.
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with pride, ultimately. We don't want anyone to see our weaknesses. We don't want to be standing in front of a crowd saying, look, I don't have the answers. Because like that whole bit about, we talked about influencers putting on the act so others will listen. If we let other people know that we're vulnerable, maybe they don't want to listen to us. Maybe we would be shunned from the community. Maybe our well-being, our being who we are will now diminish in the eyes of others, when that's should never be the case, but that's the fear.
Yeah, that idea that if we give the crowd, others, the ability, the power to validate who we are, or to tell us who we are. Remember, everybody tells Willow, you're no sorcerer, you're just a farmer, and not a very good one at that. And so when we allow the others to tell us who we are, they can also tell us who we're not. Yeah. We're constantly living out of that. And instead of what we should be doing is going to God with that and reminding him. And sometimes even the church does this. It's like, oh, when you say, I'm a sinner saved by grace, well, that has a kernel of truth to it. We've also been given a new heart. I was at a church a couple of weeks ago, and part of their sort of responsive readings was the one in Jeremiah, the heart is deceitfully wicked. Who can trust it? I'm like, but I have a new heart now. That's not who I am anymore. Every moment I'm not committing a sin because you're telling me I'm sinning by reading the Bible. I'm sinning by doing something for my wife or my kids. It's like, I don't, we get that layer of, if I'm just a sinner, then that's all I'll ever be. So that idea that I mentioned about the sort of the average of the 5 people we spend the most time with, there is that idea that we can't rise above the friends, the people that we spend time with. It's like if they're at a certain level, and I don't mean sort of economically or vocationally, but if to a certain degree spiritually, but emotionally and sort of, maybe, I don't know what I'm trying to say. But if you surround yourself with people who are at a certain level or they're pursuing certain things, then eventually they're going to wear you down. You can't stand against them all the time. And I think that's what we see with Sorsha. Because all her life she's been sort of the queen's, the mother's right-hand woman. She's the one the queen trusts. But why does she trust her? Because she's going along with her bad stuff, right? She's the obvious villain. She's turning people into weasels or marmots or whatever she turns the enchantress into. She freezes the people in the castle to stone. She turns all the army into pigs. She's trying to kill a baby. And what changes her is an experience that it seems like she's never had before. And this is when Mad Mardigan gets hit in the head with the love potion dust. What was they called? The brownies call it the broken heart. Isn't that what they call it?
I'm not sure what they called it. I just remember it was love potion. And it was glittery and golden.
Yeah. And so they're going in to rescue the baby, and he sees Sorsha, and he's overcome, this woman who's kicked him in the face, who's dragging him around as a prisoner. All of a sudden, he's professing his love for her. And you see a change come over because this is something that's never happened before. Again, going back to that idea of who we are, who we think we are, when it comes up against somebody else's different vision for us.
Wake from this hateful sleep. It deprives me of your beauty. The beauty of your eyes.
One move, jackass, and you really will be a woman.
You are my sun, my moon, my starlit sky. Without you, I dwell in darkness. I love you.
What are you doing here?
Your power has enchanted me. I stand helpless against it. Come to me now. Tonight, let me worship you in my arms.
Get away from me!
I love you.
Stop saying that!
How can I stop the beating of my heart? It pounds like never before.
Out of fear.
Out of love.
I can stop it. I'll kill you.
Death next to love is a trivial thing. Your touch is worth 100,000 deaths.
See, that's a line you should probably use on your wife at some point. Your touch is worth 1,000 deaths.
She'll probably have me test that out.
So this was another one of those scenes that you enjoy, you love, and it's just fun seeing Val Kilmer playing like this. A young, obviously super young Val Kilmer. But what is it about this scene that stands out to you, Bryan?
Well, the fun part is that he's under this love potion spell, and they're outside the tent saying, "Get the baby! What are you doing? Get the baby!" And he's like, he turns for the baby at one moment, then he goes back to Sorsha, and then he looks back to the baby again, then he's back to Sorsha, and then that takes place. And as fun as it is to see that happen, to see him profess his love in this silly way and how he ultimately charms her, what really stands out to me is that he had one job: get the baby and get out. And it would have been so easy. All he had to do was get to that baby, get Laura Dannon, and get out. But no, he just couldn't. He succumbed to his desire, Sorsha, who is asleep on the bed. And for me, that's something that's so easy for us to do sometimes. We lose track of what we're supposed to do, what purpose we have, our goals, our mission, our duty. Like as a parent, it's very easy for me to pick up my phone and play on a game or browse and see the local news, look at the weather. I have 1,000 reasons to pick up my phone, but at the same time, my children might be fighting in the hallway, slamming doors and going bonkers. And am I going to just zone out and keep staring at my phone and let that happen? Or am I going to be the parent I need to be and help my children figure out how to deal with their conflict a little bit better? But that's there's so many ways that comes into play. Some families fall apart because of lust. The father or the mother, they might feel like they're lacking something in their relationship, and they have a moment of lustful desire, and they'll turn away from their marriage for a brief period and hurt so many people in the process, not even realizing it. And they know later, and even at that moment, that they shouldn't. But for whatever reason, the desire is just too strong at that time. And the same thing when it comes to drugs. There's so many people I've known in my life who just really good people, but they're so tied into the drugs, and they succumb to that need, that desire for that drug long enough to hurt people. And they know they're hurting people, and they know they're hurting themselves, but that desire is so strong. And I think that scene says it all for it. Even though it's very comical and it's fun and it drives a story and it really pushes that relationship between Madmartigan and Sorsha. It's just a whole lot of fun. But there's so much we can learn from that scene because it's so easy to turn away from what we're supposed to do and go into our desires. If we can exercise a little bit more discipline to overcome those desirous moments, we can really grow so much more powerful as individuals and affect the world around us in positive ways because we're disciplined enough to face other desires and other problems, other conflicts.
And I think this is a sign of good storytelling, is the fact that a scene like this, we can take a scene like this and see, we get multiple interpretations from it. Because while we see on the one hand that Madmartigan forsakes his duty, his mission, what results from it is ultimately positive. You know, if they had just gone in and snuck out with Laura Dannon, who knows, they might have ended up in the wilderness by themselves and tracked down and all died. Because of the comedy of errors that ensued as a result, one, Sorsha begins, her frozen heart begins to thaw, as you can say, but he ends up re-meeting with Eric down at the bottom of the hill. He commits to serving Laura Dannon because Madmartigan has a moment where he's like, where Eric's like, "Oh, you're a thief. You're only in it for yourself." And for him, it's a moment of clarity. He's able to say, "No, this is my purpose." And you know, ultimately they kidnap Sorsha, and she gets enraptured by his sword fighting of the weird dragon rancor looking thing. They're exploring some stuff with the computer animation. But I think that's where we see Joseph at the end of Genesis when he says, what you intended for evil, God used for good. God doesn't call it good. It wasn't good that Willow had to step in and ended up getting captured. Like, he put the entire mission at risk. That wasn't good. But what ended up was you look at the long-term effects, the restoration of Sorsha, the inspiring of Eric and inviting them into your plans. And when we do have those moments, because guess what? We will all have those moments where we know our purpose and we just get distracted by some bright, beautiful thing over to the side, that it's all is not lost. And as long as we keep remembering our purpose, even when we get distracted, we have to remember our purpose. He goes off on it reminded me of the Lampoon's Christmas when they're flying down the hill on the shield. They just needed that industrial grade lubricant or whatever it was.
That was it.
I think this sort of leads us to the last clip that you wanted to talk about. Again, the truth is, at some point we will all come under a spell. I love that you talked about the phone. Several months ago, I took Instagram and TikTok off my phone because, not that I was doing anything bad, but I was losing like an hour just looking at the reels, looking to be entertained, looking at stuff that's funny or, old friends bloopers and clips, or, making fun of video games and how kind of ridiculous some of the stuff is. And there's an abundance of stuff out there that can be distracting, but that's exactly what it is. It's distracting because we want a place where we don't have to do that. We want a place where, we're never a sinner. We're always a saint. We're where we don't experience the Paul in Romans 7, where we do what we don't want to do. We don't do what we want to do. What a wretched man am I. And we want what Willow talks about at the end, where he does this old rope-a-dope, hidden pig trick against Bavmorda. And he says, I'm a great sorcerer. I'm going to send her somewhere where you can't get her, where evil can't get her. And you really sort of use what Bavmorda's response is as a sort of a way to teach your kids.
You stupid hag! With my magic, I'll send her into a... You're no sorcerer! Into a realm where evil cannot touch her.
Impossible! There's no such place!
And it's super quick. It's almost like a throwaway line. You sort of know that Willow doesn't really have the baby in his arms. He's just, like I said, rope-a-doping her. But that idea that she's actually... Because sometimes the bad guy does speak truth. The truth is, there's not a place on earth where we can find that evil will not touch us.
This scene, one thing that comes to my mind now that you've replayed it is one thing that she says really quickly is, "You're no sorcerer." And that's her taking away Willow's claim and what Willow wants to be, who he is. He knows that he has the ability to be a sorcerer. He used a wand that only a sorcerer could use. So he already knows who he is, and she's already denying him that. And sometimes that happens in our life when we confront something that's really bad and they said, "Oh, you're no man." I've heard that before from people. "You're no man." People might say something to hurt you, and they know that they're not speaking true. And that's something that we just got to be ready to face. Now, when it comes to facing evil and protecting the ones we love from evil, in this case, Willow was successful. Bavmorda wasn't able to touch Elora Danan. But the thing is, we're not around our children 24/7 once when they reach a certain age. And once when they get into middle school was the time for me. It's when I started smelling funny smells around different people who were smoking cigarettes and other things. And some people were actually drinking alcohol who were like only 14 years old around me. start getting into these little places, because kids are exploring this stuff, and they're coming across people who don't really mind introducing them to things they shouldn't be introduced to. We just have to educate our kids the best we can and hope that they make the best decisions for themselves when they come face to face with Bavmorda in their time. But we have to trust that they'll perform that. When we're facing it ourselves, however we face it, our children, our loved ones, they're watching. Maybe it's not a child, maybe it's a friend. I had a few friends who look up to me, and if I react to a certain situation with anger, they'll justify it. They'll back me like, hey, yeah, you did that just right. And then it's going to become part of our environment, the way, this is how we should handle things. We should handle it with violence or with anger. You have every right to yell at that person or whatever. But if you handle it more peacefully, it's something profound happens. When someone's overcome with some sense of peace, it's really peaceful, and it feels really good, and it's like kicking off endorphins. Like if you go for a run for like 45 minutes and your body's just kind of tingling, it feels good and you feel great. It's like you had a cup of coffee and you didn't even buy it or you didn't even make it. But when you really have an overwhelming sense of peace that comes over you in the face of a bad moment, it's like you're coming really close to God. And you can teach people that by the way you react to evil. If you want to react, fight fire with fire. That's the song by Metallica. It's an old saying. If they're going to fight fire with fire, sometimes it's necessary. Sometimes you have to step up and be aggressive, or someone's going to roll right over you. Of course, you don't want that. But if it's a war on words, if it's name calling, there's no reason to stoop to that level. You have to find the peace and rise above it, and just equip yourself and teach your children how to handle it when they're faced with it.
A frequent message that I've hear a lot is that idea that most of the stuff we teach is caught and not taught, shown by how we live more than by the things we say. It was interesting to me as you were kind of talking, going back to this theme that's emerged of we think we're less than we are, or we listen to the crowd to tell us who we are. In that moment, she says, "You're no sorcerer." Willow doesn't argue, because if, like you just said, if he fought sorcery with sorcery, he's going to lose, not because he's not a sorcerer, but just because she's bigger, she's stronger, she's more powerful than he is. If he fights her on her terms, he's going to lose. And in order to actually succeed, he's got to tap into the other part of him, right? Because none of us are one-dimensional. That's what makes the movies uninteresting to me is like if somebody's just sort of one-dimensional, they're this and that's it. It's like that's a boring character. And that's, like you said, what you enjoy about these movies. This movie is the characters, because they're all sort of flawed. They're all figuring it out. They're all just like us. Because we can be a great dad in one moment and a terrible one 5 minutes later. We can be, because we're wrestling with uncertainty. I don't know if I should do this. I don't know if I should do that. Neither are bad, but you don't know what's going to have the best impact. Like, he doesn't argue that he is a sorcerer because he knows that, like you mentioned with the wand, he knows he is a sorcerer because he was able to use the wand. But he knows that part won't win. And so he doesn't try to force who he is or prove who he is. He puts his purpose first. His purpose is to save and rescue Elora Danan. And it's only by doing that sort of he becomes a whole person. He is a farmer. He is a husband. He is a father. He is sort of a sleight of hand trick magician. He is a sorcerer. He is all these things. And he can tap into that, whereas she's just a sorcerer. That's the only trick in the book she knows. She can't for Bavmorda. If she's looking at him thinking, oh, he must have done it, it doesn't even cross her mind that he, pulled a sleight of hand trick. She just figures he knew some magic more than her and can't fathom it. And so she loses and gets sucked into the nether regions. That sounds weird.
Nether regions. No.
I hate when I get sucked into the nether regions.
Serves her right for turning people into pigs, for goodness sakes.
She gets sucked into the nether realms. It doesn't sound any better, does it?
It might be a while for me. Okay, I'm going to calm down.
I understand all those blooper videos much better now. So she loses and she sort of dies. Whatever happens to her, she disappears. And then like all of it, like we mentioned with the Joseph Campbell stuff, he returns home a more wholehearted person because he's not trying to be something he's not. He knows that, yes, he is who he is, right? He is a farmer. He is the father. He is the son, the husband, and he is the magician. He is the sorcerer. Those are all components. And just like us, we're trying to become more wholehearted. And it's not just so that we can be, he doesn't stay at Mad Mardigan's side. He doesn't stay at Elora Danan's side. His job is done. He's got to return home because his true purpose and his true mission is to be the husband, is to be the father, and take care of his family. And now he can do that because he's been transformed. And that's the whole purpose of the story. That's the whole purpose of the gospel, is for us to be transformed. And that comes from within, not without. And all the, we can have a whole other hour-long conversation about transformation and how that occurs and all that. But I figure we're coming to a close here.
And another thing that ties well into that is the fact that sometimes we're going to make mistakes along the way and we can be forgiven. And it's also very smart that we remember from the Lord's Prayer, we ask to be forgiven. We should also forgive those who have trespassed against us. If they trespass us against 1,000,000 times, we can still forgive them. We don't need to forget the last 999 times they trespassed against us. But we can still forgive them and just try to be wiser about having that person being involved in our lives as much.
Yeah, I heard forgiveness is like if somebody comes in and their transgression was muddy prints across your floor. Forgiveness is the next time they come over, you answer the door. You may not let them in without checking their feet, but you still answer the door. If you don't forgive them, that's sort of like not answering the door. They're at the door, they're ringing the bell, and you just don't answer. So forgiveness, we don't have to allow them to do the same things that they've been doing, but you still, it's a process. And honestly, it's a miracle because forgiveness isn't just hard, it's impossible.
Yeah, it can be. It really is. Especially when it comes to ourselves. There's some things that, even though I forgive myself about the weird things I've done as a teenager, the cringy things, I think about the things I said, silly things sometimes, but it always comes back to me, and I just have to smile upon my younger self and like, I forgive you. What were you thinking, pal?
Yeah, he was Mad Mardigan with the love potion.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, that didn't make sense. And then we just say, okay, we pray that God uses it to move us where we need to be, and hopefully we don't make that same mistake twice.
Yeah.
So, Bryan, where can people find more about you? And because you've written a book. So where can they find about you, and tell us real quick about the book that you wrote with, and Stacy and Troy published it.
Yeah,
correct?
They were a great help. They're so much fun. They're good people. And I couldn't ask for a better team to be a part of. I have a website, BryanTimothyMitchell.com. You can also find me on their website at descendantpublishing.com. my book, it's my debut book. The ebook, we're keeping it at 99 cents. So it's a thank you for giving me a shot. It's the very first work. I feel proud of it. It's a modern day twist on Dante's Inferno. I did a lot of research on Dante's Inferno, the 9 circles of hell, and wondered what it would be like if it was really hell. And about 1800 years after Dante fell, another guy falls in, but he has his life intact. What would that be like? Who would he run across? Would he be with someone who he could trust, like Virgil, a famous poet who he really admires? Or would it be some other spirit that he shouldn't trust? Someone who's tricky and who's very good at manipulating someone into a situation and dragging them down. And how would this person affect that world? Would he totally take on the environment, or would his living being, his self, be able to affect change in that world, affect change in the other people who have already fallen into that dark world? So those were some of the questions that brought on that book, Infernal Fall. And if you're interested, like I said, it's 99 cents. And for a short period of time, we are giving away free audiobooks. That more on that contest is on my website if you're interested.
All right, so check that out. That's BryanTimothyMitchell.com. And I mean, go check out his book because it's 99 cents. It's cheaper than a cup of coffee. Even like regular, just nothing in it, no fancy cup of coffee. That's like $2 to $4 nowadays. So it'll be a lot better than that because you never know what you're going to get in that cup sometimes. So check that out. Bryan, thank you for your time talking about this movie. And as always, I get surprised at sort of where God leads our conversation and what I see out of it. You know, we talk a little bit about, I think we're going to go in this direction, and then things just sort of pop up along the way that take us to interesting places. So thanks for being along for the ride with that.
Oh, it was a lot of fun, Paul. We got to do this again.
Sounds good, man. And so this has been Bryan Timothy Mitchell and Paul McDonald talking about Willow. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If I just wanted to throw this out there, if you wanted to, like, this is a good movie to watch with kids. So I've had some people ask me, they're like, hey, I want to sort of do this with people. I want to look at movies in a deeper level. And getting people to watch a movie is pretty easy. Getting them to listen to a podcast may not be so easy. But on the show notes and on our website at menatthemovies.com/podcast, we actually have we could do some deeper stuff, but you have questions. So if you wanted to, you could just watch Willow, and then there's going to be questions right there in the show notes. So if it's on your phone, you don't need to make them listen. You don't need to have your kids listen to the podcast. You can just ask them some of the questions and see where it leads. Because that's honestly how I approach. I ask Bryan some questions and we see what happens. So I wanted to make sure that I had a buddy of mine that was trying to do something like that. So if you're leading a men's group, you just want to talk about the deeper themes with your kids, we've got those resources for you to make it super easy and make it, I mean, I'd love more listeners, but if it's a hard ask sometimes if it's your teenager kid. So so those are available. Check them out and check out Bryan's website. And I hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?